All right, all right, all right. And we're live. We're live on all the things. We're live on all the things. Great day to you, beautiful people. Great day to you. I'm Jamal Calpin, and welcome to Reading with Jam. So we are spending time reading personal development books that hopefully are helping with the area of mental health, emotional intelligence, and just trying to become a better person. And particularly for my YouTube channel, The Beneficial Black Man, hopefully this was helping us to become better men. um, I am an actor, a voice actor, and a content creator. And so I figured I'd take this time with reading with Jam, take time to practice my voice acting skills as I narrate the book, but also spend time reading things that I was personally going to read and share them with you all. So hopefully it will be beneficial to you, that you'll get something from it. We have been reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And so far, I think it's been a really good book, a really good book, as we are covering the map of emotions, I guess, um, within us. And I think it's really cool the analogy that she has, again, the Atlas of the Heart. And for me, I usually look at the heart as representative of our soul. So it's our mind, our emotions, and our will. So it's our soul, and we need to better understand it so that we can be better people, so that we can be better men, so that we can be beneficial in this life. And if we don't make the effort and put in the time to learn how to improve and grow, we'll stagnate. We'll stagnate, and that will be detrimental to ourselves, but also those around us that we're trying to relate to. And the beautiful thing I like about this book is that she's putting language to a lot of things that we may feel or that we experience in life. And language is helpful because it gives us clarity on what's happening with us. It gives us clarity on what we may need to communicate for our own understanding, and for what we're trying to communicate to our partners or friends and family. If we don't have that language, it makes it very, very difficult for us to be vulnerable. It makes it difficult for us to be transparent. It makes it very difficult for us to even stand up for ourselves or to set boundaries. Like, we need this language. Language is a powerful tool to help make change, um, and take control of our lives. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this book, and that it is helping provide language for this huge component of our lives, which I think is our soul. And so I'm excited. So we are continuing to read, and we are now on chapter 5. Chapter 5. And for those who are on YouTube, I apologize that I look so washed out. I feel like, oh my gosh, I look better on Instagram. I don't know. Maybe it's a filter or something. But, anyways, we're reading chapter 5, Places We Go When Things Aren't What They Seem. So, again, we are reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And we're starting with, or today we're reading chapter 5. Got 30 minutes on the clock because we were only reading for 30 minutes. And I'll try to, share my thoughts a little bit. But I know y'all have busy schedules. I have busy schedules, but this is important. So let's get into it. 30 minutes on the clock. Start Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Chapter 5. Places We Go When Things Aren't What They Seem. Amusement, bittersweetness, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance, paradox, irony, sarcasm. What happens when we feel two competing emotions at the same time? Can two seemingly contradictory thoughts both be true? Welcome to being human. Competing emotions and contradictory thoughts are messy and can feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, even irritating. But it's important to remember that this push pull is a reflection of our complexity. And if we're willing to stay with it and stay curious, complexity is one of our greatest teachers. The problem starts when we don't have the skills or experience to tolerate the uncertainty and ambiguity, and we give in to the cravings for neat, mutually exclusive categories. There's nothing more limiting than tapping out of tension and oversimplifying the thoughts and feelings that have the power to help us understand who we are and what we need. Adam Grant has been the top rated professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania for 7 years. As an organizational psychologist, he is a leading expert on how we can find motivation and meaning, and live more generous and creative lives. Adam is a number 1 New York Times bestselling writer, and his latest book, Think Again: The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know, might be my new favorite. I love talking to, learning from, and debating with Adam. We've been on each other's podcasts, and it's always fun. You can hear our brains grinding over the airwaves. In Think Again, Adam writes about the problem of oversimplifying and the importance of complexity. As consumers of information, we have a role to play in embracing a more nuanced point of view. When we're reading, listening, or watching, we can learn to recognize complexity as a signal of credibility. We can favor content and sources that present many sides of an issue rather than just one or two. When we come across simplifying headlines, we can fight our tendency to accept binaries by asking what additional perspectives are missing between the extremes. This applies when we're the ones producing and communicating information too. New research suggests that when journalists acknowledge the uncertainties around facts on complex issues like climate change and immigration, it doesn't undermine their readers' trust. In multiple experiments have shown that when experts express doubt, they become more persuasive. When someone knowledgeable admits uncertainty, it surprises people, and they end up paying more attention to the substance of the argument. While Adam didn't write this about our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, the same wisdom applies. When we gather information from our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, especially the layered, messy ones, the tension can serve us. When we're communicating our feelings and thoughts to ourselves and others, we might want to consider sharing our uncertainties. When someone tells me, I'm not sure how I feel, I'm sad, but weirdly, I'm also relieved. My first thought isn't, yikes, they have no idea how they feel, or, they don't have a lot of self awareness. My first thought is normally, oh man, I get that. And I get how those feelings can coexist. That makes sense. The uncertainty feels like self awareness to me. When someone tells me, well, I'm not sure what I think about that policy, I used to be a fierce proponent of it, but I'm learning more and more, and I'm not as sure as I used to be. My first thought isn't, what a flip flopper. My first thought is normally, wow, that's rare. What are you learning? I'm curious. Again, it's counterintuitive, but acknowledging uncertainty is a function of grounded confidence, and it feels like humility to me. Amusement. The etymology of amusement is interesting. The word dates from the late 1500s, when it meant a pleasurable diversion from work or duty. According to researchers, amusement is connected to humor and includes elements of unexpectedness, incongruity, and playfulness. It's typically seen as a brief spike in a person's level of cheerfulness, lasting only a few seconds. The definition of amusement that aligns with our research is pleasurable, relaxed excitation. Amusement differs from happiness in that happiness is a general sense of pleasure, whereas amusement appeals specifically to one's sense of humor. There are two themes that clearly help distinguish amusement from other positive emotions, like contentment, gratitude, interest, joy, love, or pride. One, an awareness of incongruity. There's something unexpected about what causes us to be amused. We weren't expecting that punchline or that behavior or that timing. And number two, when we feel amusement, we feel playful with those around us. Is amusement important at work? Research shows that breaks involving amusement may help replenish depleted, excuse me, big up. Research shows that breaks involving amusement may help replenish depleted cognitive resources, and that the replenishment continues through difficult tasks. After reading the research on amusement, I started thinking about how people say, I did not find that amusing, and why it's sometimes said in a judgmental voice. I don't have any data to support this supposition, but I wonder if what we're saying is that that unexpected thing that you did or said that was supposed to be funny was not funny. It's almost like you failed at your attempt to be funny. That was neither playful nor pleasurable. It takes me straight back to my parents reading a note from my teacher and me trying to make a joke about what really happened in the classroom. I can still hear my mom saying, I'm not amused. Bittersweet. The bittersweet pick up. The bittersweet side of appreciating life's most precious moments is the unbearable awareness that those moments are passing. Mark Parent, believing it all. Bittersweet is a mixed feeling of happiness and sadness. As someone who feels bittersweet about a lot of things, especially related to Ellen and Charlie, I was curious about this emotion. I believe that's her children. With very few exceptions, developmental milestones leave me feeling bittersweet. I'm proud of Ellen and excited about her new apartment in a different city. And I share Charlie's happiness about his new driver's license. But I'm also sad when I walk by Ellen's room in our house. And I'm sad that I don't get to drive Charlie and his friends to school every morning, which is when you overhear the best conversations. I asked folks across my social media channels to share some examples of experiences that felt bittersweet for them, and we received more than 40,000 beautiful, heartfelt comments. I don't think I was fully aware of the depth of humanity that lives in the curves of this emotion. Here are some of the most commonly shared experiences and a few notes on the context: watching children grow up, leaving a job, divorce, ending a relationship, graduating, letting go of friendships that aren't working, moving, death of a loved one, teachers watching students graduate, retiring, coming home from vacation. What all of the comments have in common is sadness about letting go of something, mixed with happiness and or gratitude about what's been experienced and or what's next. Several things that are important to keep in mind about feeling bittersweet. It's not the same as ambivalence. When you, sorry, pick up. It's not this excuse me, it's not the same as ambivalence. When we're unsure whether we're happy or sad, it's feeling both at the same time. One line of research indicates that multiple emotions, such as happiness and sadness, may be rapidly vacillating below our consciousness, but our interpretation may be a more integrated emotional experience. It's possible that feeling bittersweet may be more frequently experienced or recognized by people who have a more nuanced ability to interpret their emotional states. Developmental research shows that the experience of mixed emotions is not present in very young children, and that it develops gradually. At around age 7 or 8, children report experiencing positive and negative emotions simultaneously, and by age 10 or 11, they can recognize and understand the tension caused by experiencing mixed emotions. Nostalgia. There's nothing wrong with celebrating the good things in our past, but memories, like witnesses, do not always tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We need to cross examine them, recognizing and accepting the inconsistencies and gaps in those that make us proud and happy, as well as those that cause us pain. Stephanie Kuntz, historian. The term nostalgia has a dark past, and I'm not sure there's a consensus about the term today. Adrian Mattei, a Vancouver based journalist and editor, has written a brilliant essay on the history and global translation of the word. I'm getting this person's name wrong. Mattia, Mati? Oh, let's go with Mati. Mati explains, and I apologize to this person if I'm getting your name wrong. Mati explains, in the late 1600s, Swiss medical student Johannes Hofer noticed a pattern in his patients who were living far from home. Those who were obsessed with returning to their estranged locations became physically, sometimes fatally, sick. To reflect his phenomenon, he coined the medical term nostalgia in 1688, which he created by combining the Greek words nostos, homecoming, and alga, pain. The disease's reported symptoms included loss of appetite, fainting, heightened suicide risk, and, according to Swiss doctor Albert van Haller, hallucinations of the people and places you miss. It ran so rampant among Swiss mercenaries fighting far flung wars that playing Coup Rain, an old Swiss milking song that seemed to send soldiers into a contagiously nostalgic frenzy, was punishable by death. Okay. Mati goes on to explain how cures of nostalgia include being burned with a hot poker and punishments, including being burned alive. As I mentioned, it's a powerful essay, and I encourage you to read it. You can find the link in the notes section. Nostalgia was considered a medical disease and a psychiatric disorder until the early 19th century. Today, researchers describe nostalgia as a frequent, primarily positive, context-specific between context-specific bittersweet emotion that combines elements of happiness and sadness with a sense of yearning and loss. The researchers also tell us that feeling nostalgic involves putting ourselves at the center of a story in which we are reminiscing about people we are close to or about important events in our lives. Interestingly, nostalgia is more likely to be triggered by negative moods like loneliness and by our struggles to find meaning in our current lives. There is some research that shows that nostalgia can serve us psychologically by increasing positive feelings and helping us navigate successfully the the vicissitudes of daily life. Vicissitudes. Okay. I don't doubt that the bittersweet recalling or romanticizing of our history can relieve pain or help us deal with the hard parts of life. But at what cost? Across our research, nostalgia emerged as a double-edged sword, a tool for both connection and disconnection. It can be an imaginary refuge from a world we don't understand and a dog whistle used to resist important growth in families, organizations, and the broader culture and to protect power, including white supremacy. What's spoken? I wish things were the way they used to be in the good old days. What's not spoken? When people knew their places. What's not spoken? When there was no accountability for the way my behaviors affect other people. What's not spoken? When we ignored other people's pain if it caused us discomfort. What's not spoken? When my authority was absolute and never challenged. So, is nostalgia good, helpful, bad, dangerous, or detrimental? The answer is yes, which is why we're lucky to have this fascinating research from Sandra Garrido. Garrido presents evidence that nostalgia can be a part of both healthy and unhealthy coping strategies, depending on an individual's personality and coping style. In her study, she found that yeah, she found that for individuals who are prone to depression or rumination, nostalgia tends to be associated with negative emotional outcomes. The level of divisive the level of divisiveness, uncertainty, and anxiety in the world today leads a lot of us to struggle with rumination, which Garrido explains is an involuntary focus on negative and pessimistic thoughts. It's important to note that she also differentiates rumination from reflection, which is highly adaptive and psychologically healthy. Rumination is also different from worry. According to researchers, worry is focused on the future, while rumination focuses on the past, excuse me, or on things about ourselves that we're stuck on. Researchers believe that rumination is a strong predicator of depression, makes us more likely to pay attention to negative things, and zaps our motivation to do things, excuse me, that would improve how we feel. This combination of rumination and nostalgia emerged from our research as destructive and disconnecting. If you're wondering how dangerous the combination can be, think back to the think back to the insurrection at the US Capitol on January 6th, 2021, or examine the strategy used by every authoritarian leader in history. Exploit fears by photoshopping a picture of yesteryear to, to be everything people wanted it to be, but never was. Seduce people into believing that a make believe past could exist again, and give them someone to blame for ruining the picture and or not being able to restore the mythical utopia. Well, Stephanie Kuntz, whose quote opens this section, explains that it's important to reality check our nostalgic ideas by uncovering and examining the trade offs and contradictions that are often deeply buried in all of our memories. Were the comfort and safety of that past existence real? If so, were they at someone else's expense? We define nostalgia as a yearning for the way things used to be and our often idealized and self protective version of the past. Cognitive dissonance. My favorite book on cognitive dissonance is Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me: Why We Justify Foolish Beliefs, Bad Decisions, and Hurtful Acts by Carol Tavris and Elliot Aronson. Talk about feeling called out. I learned a ton about how we put a spit shine on almost everything we do and remember. Or, as Aronson wrote in a more recent book, how human beings, sorry, pick up. Or, as Aronson wrote in a more recent book, how human beings engage in all kinds of cognitive gymnastics aimed at justifying their own behavior. The Tarvis in Arson's book's dedication reads, "For Leon Festinger, creator of the theory of cognitive dissonance, whose ingenuity inspired this book." Before we jump in, I want to share an abbreviated version of a story about Festinger from their book. When I first read this story, it felt impossible to believe. After surviving the past 5 years in the United States, it now feels sadly plausible. We see these double down behaviors every day, especially in the anti science movement. Tavris in Arasan explained that in 1954, the social psychologist Leon Festinger and two associates infiltrated a doomsday cult to find out what would happen when the leader's prophecy failed to be fulfilled. The leader had promised her followers that the world would end on December 21st, 1954, but that they would be picked up by a flying saucer and transported to safety at midnight on December 20th. What? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Tavris and Arasan explained many of her followers quit their jobs, gave away their houses, and dispersed their savings in anticipation of the end. Who needs money in outer space? Others waited in fear or resignation in their homes. Festinger predicted that the believers who had not made a strong commitment to the prophecy would quietly lose their faith in the leader when the world didn't end. And those who had given away their possessions and waited with other believers for the spaceship would double down on their belief in her mystical abilities. He predicted that even if the prophecy did not materialize, the followers who lost the most would demonstrate their increased commitment by doing whatever they could to get others to join them. At the time, this hypothesis, sorry, at the time, this hypothesis blew the doors off every existing theory about motivation in human behavior. It was unthinkable that people would double down once proven wrong. But by 4:45 a.m., when the spaceship was a no-show, the leaders shared a new vision of the world. Because of their strong faith, they had been spared. As hypothesized by Festinger, the most invested members responded by calling the media with the great news, and they became even more invested evangelists for the group. Luckily, the Doomsday Leader's prediction failed, but Festinger's prediction didn't, and he changed the way we think about human behavior. Tavris and Arasan write, "The engine that drives self justification, the energy that produces the need to justify our actions and decisions, especially the wrong ones, is the unpleasant feeling that Festinger called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state of tension that occurs when a person holds two cognitions, ideas, attitudes, beliefs, opinions, that are psychologically inconsistent with each other, such as smoking is a dumb thing to do because it could kill me, and I smoke 2 packs a day." I don't know how to light something. Dissonance produces mental discomfort that ranges from minor pangs to deep anguish. People don't rest easy until they find a way to reduce it. In this example, the most direct way for a smoker to reduce dissonance is by quitting. But if she has tried to quit and failed, now she must reduce dissonance by convincing herself that smoking isn't really so harmful, that smoking is worth the risk because it helps her relax or prevents her from gaining weight. After all, obesity is a health risk too, and so on. Most smokers manage to reduce dissonance in many such ingenious, if self deluding ways. Dissonance is disquieting because, sorry, pick up. Dissonance is disquieting because, sorry, Dissonance is disquieting because to hold two ideas that contradict each other is to flirt with absurdity. And as Albert Camus, I get this guy's name wrong every time, Albert Camus, I know this is not pronounced that way, I can't remember how it's pronounced. As Albert, for now, Camus observed, we are creatures who spend our lives trying to convince ourselves that our existence is not absurd. At the heart of it, Festinger's theory is about how people strive to make sense out of contradictory ideas and lead lives that are, at least in their own minds, consistent and meaningful. Hmm, sorry, I think that's interesting. Okay, sorry. Here we go. The theory inspired more than 3,000 experiments that taken together have transformed psychologists' understanding of how the human mind works. Complete. When we're faced with information that challenges what we believe, our first instinct is to make the discomfort, irritation, and vulnerability go away by resolving the dissonance. We might do this by rejecting the new information, decreasing its importance, or avoiding it altogether. The greater the magnitude of the dissonance, the greater is the pressure to reduce dissonance. In these challenging moments of dissonance, we need to stay curious and resist choosing comfort over courage. It's brave to invite new information to the table, to sit with it and hear it out. It's also rare these days. As Adam Grant writes, intelligence is traditionally viewed as the ability to think and learn. Yet, in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn. It's good. Paradox. The paradox is one of our most valuable spiritual possessions. Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. Carl Jung. While sorry, pick up. While cognitive dissonance pushes us to resolve the tension of conflicting information, paradox challenges us to straddle the tension of two conflicting elements and recognizing that they can both be true. From its Greek origins, the term paradox is the joining of two words, para, contrary to, and dokein, opinion. The Latin term paradoxum means seemingly absurd, but really true. A paradox is the appearance of contradiction between two related components. Although light and darkness seem to be opposites, you can't have one without the other. The opposing elements of a paradox are inextricably linked. Even though the elements seem contradictory, they actually complement and inform each other in ways that allow us to discover underlying truths about ourselves and the world. Here is an example of a paradox from my work. Hold on, sorry. Okay. Vulnerability is the first thing we look for in other people, and the last thing we want to show them about ourselves. Makes sense. How can both of these statements be true? If we dig into the tension of that statement, it reveals truths about us. First, we're drawn to authentic, imperfect people, but we're scared to let people see who we really are. I want to experience your vulnerability, but I don't want to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is courage in you and inadequacy in me. And I'm drawn to your vulnerability, but repelled by mine. Embracing the paradox teaches us how to think deeper and with more complexity. It invites us to reality check the validity of the statements above. It moves us away from oversimplifying how systems, organizations, and humans work. Paradox is not an emotion. Much like cognitive dissonance, it starts with thinking but brings in emotion as we start to feel the tension and pull of different ideas. In the case of paradox, our brain wants to solve the puzzle. However, paradoxes can't be fully resolved using rationality and logic. We need to allow the seeming contradictions to coexist in order to gain deeper understanding. In this way, paradoxes force us to think in expansive ways and lean into vulnerability. About 90% of the work I do these days is in organizations, working with leaders. The idea of embracing paradox has been fundamental to building organizational cultures for at least 2 decades now. In Jim Collins and Bill Lazier's book, BE, Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0, Jim writes, false dichotomies are undisciplined are undisciplined thought. In the words of F. Scott Fitzgerald, the test of a first rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Builders of greatness are comfortable with paradox. They don't oppress themselves with what we call the tyranny of the or, which pushes people to believe that things must be either A or B, but not both. Instead, they liberate themselves with the genius of the and. Undisciplined thinkers force debates into stark tyranny of the or choices. Disciplined thinkers expand the conversation to create genius of the and solutions. In our research, sorry, we found myriad permutations of genius of the and dualities. For example, creativity and discipline, innovation and execution, humility and audacity, and freedom and responsibility. In line with Jim's argument, a large body of research shows that rejecting paradox can result in conflict and turmoil. Conversely, engaging with a paradox and accepting the competing elements as both valid can foster creativity, innovation, and productivity. Paradoxes, hard and good. Irony and sarcasm. I don't love putting these two words together. My attempt at sarcasm. I don't like going on the record about knowing the difference between sarcasm and irony because it means I can't defend my clever use of sarcasm by saying I'm just being ironic. My attempt at irony. Irony and sarcasm are forms of communication in which the literal meaning of the words is different, often opposite from the intended message. In both irony and sarcasm, there may be an element of criticism and humor. However, sarcasm is a particular type of irony in which the underlying message is normally meant to ridicule, tease, or criticize. Excuse me. Both irony and sarcasm are easily misunderstood, especially when you're talking to someone you don't know well, when there's already some heightened emotion in the exchange, or when you're emailing or texting. As explained in an overview of neurological findings related to irony and sarcasm, researchers suggest that the successful comprehension of irony depends on the perceiver's ability to infer other people's mental states, thoughts, and feelings, which is exceptionally difficult over text and email. Research on intent behind delivery of sarcastic communication has been mixed, with some studies indicating that sarcasm is intended to soften the blow, and other research showing that sarcasm is intended to be more hurtful than direct criticism. Recipients of sarcastic communication have varying interpretations of intent, which do not always map onto the intended meaning. One of the things that I learned early in my work is the developmental requirements for understanding irony and sarcasm. While we sometimes think of our kids as being more than capable of sarcasm, the research tells us that understanding the subtleties of irony and sarcasm is a developmental process that involves coordination of multiple brain areas. According to Ruth Fillick and her colleagues, children do not seem to distinguish between irony and sarcasm until the age of 9 or 10, when they master second order mental state reasoning. Another group of researchers finds that although middle school age children can correctly discern the sarcastic speaker's meaning and attitude, appreciation of sarcasm's humor develops through adolescence, and development of full understanding of the nuances of both communication styles continues into adulthood. I was raised in a family where sarcasm was confused with intellectual ability and craft. When I was a kid, there were many instances when teasing and sarcasm were too hurtful or went too far or went on for too long. I remember reading when I was pregnant with Ellen that the word sarcasm comes from a Greek word meaning to tear flesh. We didn't do it perfectly, but Steve and I set an intention to watch our use of sarcasm around and with the kids. It can go wrong too quickly and often ends up in shame and tears. I will confess, however, that my dear friend Chaz and I can have so much fun with each other while trading ironic and sarcastic comments. When I read that these behaviors can sometimes enhance close relationships and highlight closeness, I wasn't surprised. We've been friends for more than 30 years, and the verbal sparring is great fun. I asked him why he thinks it works, and we agreed that we're very careful and don't use sarcasm and irony to express emotions and thoughts that we're afraid to talk about. We have plenty of hard conversations and we're diligent about not weaponizing words. Sarcasm and irony are reserved for playfulness only. I think that's the biggest watch out with irony and sarcasm. Are you dressing something up in humor that actually requires clarity and honesty? All right. That ends today's reading. That was the end of chapter 5 of Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Sorry, I want to. Yep, that was. Sorry, that didn't work out the way I wanted it to. Okay, hold up. We just finished reading chapter 5 of Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And the topic or the subject of this chapter was trying to get back to the. This is the thing. If I had a paperback book, it would be easy to just flip, but Kindle, it takes a while. The title of the chapter is okay. Places we go when things aren't what they seem. I thought this was a really good chapter, and actually, uh, I would say something that I've been learning. Which okay, so the thing about learning about emotional intelligence and learning about like continuing to grow in the area of mental health and personal development, one of the hard things, and maybe it's just a me thing, but one of the hard things is realizing how much you don't know and how much like in the I don't know this, you do at times, or at least I do. I feel inadequate, especially when it's something I don't want to say as simple, but something that is as important and so directly tied to our humanity as emotions. You know, emotions should maybe should is not a good word, but emotions you would think if this is something that's very important to humanity, because, like I said in the beginning of this stream, our heart, I believe, is our soul, and our soul is us. You know, and you would think as a 34-year-old man I would have a decent understanding of my soul. I would have a decent understanding and grasp of my emotions, of my myself. So even my thoughts and my emotions and my will. But in studying and reading this kind of content, finding out how much I don't know, how much I don't understand, sometimes it can be a little like, damn, why don't I know this? Why didn't I not have the language for this before? Why do I feel so behind in this area of life when it's so important? Your soul is important. Understanding your emotions is important. Knowing how to process your thoughts and deal with things is important. And so like this whole section, um, the way that I guess the way I would sum it up, this whole section of talking about the messy middle of life and how you have all of these complexities with emotions and with thoughts and experiences and how it's actually something that we should embrace. I think for the longest time, even with in the areas of faith, I would say at this point that I'm a very spiritual person. I try not to be too religious, but as a person that faith has been a very big deal for me, I realize that in some faith and spiritual spaces, there isn't a lot of space given for nuance. There isn't a lot of space given for complexities. There isn't a lot of space given for messiness. The goal, very often in religious places, is to make everything as black and white and as simple as possible. Which, again, I get it. It makes sense, but it's not a fair reflection of existence. It's not a fair reflection of humanity. And I would also say that it's not a fair reflection of the Most High. as in the book mentioned that simplifying and trying to more or less streamline stuff actually takes away from the good stuff. It takes away from those complexities. It takes away from the deepness of what we should be, what we are able to experience in this life. But it can be frustrating having to face that messy middle. It can be frustrating to have to deal with those paradoxes, to deal with um what are some of the other words she used? Let me see if I can find them real quick. Doo-doo-doo. Um, Dealing with paradoxes, dealing with bittersweetness, uh, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance. That that stuff, I think, at least for me, I'm going to speak for myself, has been challenging to face. Challenging to face the reality of certain aspects of myself that I thought one way, but there was another reality that existed. For example, I'll use I'll use something that I've been working through, an experience that I had in college that I'm still working through. Uh, Part of an organization, and it's a fraternity, Alpha Nu Omega. If you follow me, you know me for a while, you know about it. There was one time I was having we were having an event on our campus, and it's a brother sister organization, and we were spending time hanging out with some sisters from another chapter, and one of the sisters, I don't know how the conversation came up, but but she told me, she was like, you come off really mean sometimes. You come off really mean sometimes, uh, or at least you give off this perception that you're a really mean person. And it took me back. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I didn't know that. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. And of course, I'm not trying to be mean to people I consider my brothers and sisters or whatever. And it hurt to find that out. And it hurts to find out things like that about yourself. It hurts to find out that, yeah, you're not as kind as you think you are. You're not as nice as you think you are. You're not, your perception of yourself isn't necessarily matching up with the reality of your actions. And that has been difficult for me. That has been difficult for me even in areas of my marriage. Um, Struggling with, there's a way that you look on the outside to everybody else, but then there are times where you don't match up with that on the inside. Everybody has, I mean, I can be wrong. So I'll just talk about myself. Um, it sucks. It sucks to find that out. It sucks to find out that there are paradoxes in your life, that there may be areas where you're not as integral as you thought you were, that things weren't as lined up as you thought or believed. But as the book encourages, and as I've been learning, it's more important and it's more beneficial to embrace that messiness and try to figure out a way through it rather than fighting against it, rather than denying it, rather than avoiding it altogether. Embracing that, okay, there are some cognitive dissonances, there are some paradoxes, there are some conflicts here in your behavior, in your actions, in your words. Either you're going to face them and work through them to try to make changes in your life, or you're going to choose to continue to be stuck and continue to present falsely to the world and to those around you and to those that you love. And so, again, I think that's why it's so important to get language for this stuff. It's important to get language for relationships. It's important to get language for thoughts and feelings and aspects of the soul so that you can do the work to address them. You can do the work to heal them. You can do the work, to get to better places. So I'm grateful for resources like this. I'm grateful that it shines light on areas that may have been dark and murky, even though in your mind you may think that it's clear and cut, that it's actually there's some mess there. And you got to deal with it. You got to deal with the mess. And it doesn't necessarily mean you got to clean it all the way. Clean it all the way. Like some people, it's just like, let's blow it up and get rid of all of it. Well, no, sometimes you need to sit down and go through it. You need to pick through it. It's kind of like when you're moving. When you move, this has been my experience. When people move, that's when they find out how much stuff they have. Because when things are stored away in closets, under beds, stored neatly, you don't you don't realize how much stuff you have. But when you need to get rid of everything, when you need to put everything in boxes, when you need to take it from one place and put it to another place, then you find out I got a lot of books. I got a lot of sheets. I got a lot of clothes. Why do I have so many pants? Where'd all these papers come from? What is this stuff? Keep finding things. And I feel like our life is the same way. And as we do the emotional work, as we do the soul work and take the time to address those aspects of ourselves, those messy areas of ourselves, start to find out you got a lot there, a lot that you need to unpack, a lot that you need to deal with. And it can be challenging. It can be hard. It can be heartbreaking. It can be frustrating, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And I think, especially if we're trying to become better men, if you're trying to become a beneficial man for yourself and for your community and for God's glory, you got to do that hard stuff. You got to step into the mess. And sometimes the hardest mess to step in is your own, but it's important to do that. But okay, I think I've been on here long enough. And hopefully you found today's reading beneficial. We will continue tomorrow with the next chapter. I think chapter 6. I don't know how many chapters this book is, but I think we're making good. We're not rushing through it. We're not rushing through it. And you shouldn't rush through stuff like this because you need to take time with it, digest it, learn from it. But thank you all for joining me. Thank you all on Instagram for joining me. I appreciate you. For those on YouTube, I appreciate you. Um, I will be back tomorrow to read chapter 6. We've been reading Alice of the Heart by Brene Brown. I'm Jamal Calpin, and this is Reading with Jam. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.